You think about people, when you're in your physical prime, you're hormonally enriched. Hormones are critical for muscle mass, for bone density. One of the scourges of the elderly, a broken hip. You don't see 30-year-olds breaking their hip. That is a devastating outcome that leads to death and disability. And it directly ties to hormonal depletion. You can take all the vitamin D and calcium you want, but without hormones, that bone will decay, inevitably.
You're listening to the Live Life Longer show with Dan Voss, inspiring you to live longer through the cold, the hot, breathing, eating, and being nature. In this week's episode, my guest is Dr. Stephen Petteruti. An honors English graduate from Tufts University, Dr. Petteruti continued on to medical school to become a family practice physician. In 2014, with a holistic, patient-centered approach, Dr. Petteruti launched Intellectual Medicine 120, offering concierge medical services, functional medicine, facial anti-aging treatments, and advanced techniques to manage the body's aging process. Along with his wife, Shannon, he is the founder of the DRIPBaR Centers for IV Vitamin Therapy. Dr. Petteruti is a sought-after course director and lecturer on the topic of functional cancer treatment, weight loss, and anti-aging medicine. He has earned both the Patient's Choice Award 10 times and the Compassionate Doctor Recognition Award 9 times over the past decade. Dr. Steve Petteruti, welcome to the Live Life Longer show.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be on.
Yeah, I've been enjoying our conversation, pre-recording. I feel like so much of your work and what you enjoy talking about really aligns nicely with what I'd like to talk about and the topics that we cover on this podcast and what my audience enjoys learning about. So I think we're due for some really good conversation here. I would love to start the conversation around conventional and modern medicine. You know, it's been estimated that medical care would rank third behind heart disease and cancer as a cause of death, which is hard for me to even say that. But how can conventional medicine hurt us, and how can we protect ourselves from modern medicine?
Yeah, that's a great statistic, and it's true. I think that it can hurt us by virtue of well-intended but a little bit myopic vision. So, for instance, in Western medicine, we've chopped people up into pieces. We no longer see a whole person. We see pieces of a person. I'll give you a quick vignette. A patient of mine recovered from stage 3 pancreatic cancer, had a surgical procedure to remove part of the pancreas, a horrible cancer with a bad prognosis. She's been thriving, in part, we believe, by virtue of infusion-based health support, vitamin C and mistletoe. So she came to me one day looking for surgical clearance to do a knee replacement. Now pause and freeze frame. Here's a person of advanced age with a cancer that's in remission but can't be considered eliminated, about to undergo a huge body trauma. Surgery, folks, is not trivial. It is a profound negative effect. And my concern for her was, yeah, the knee hurts, but let's take a step back and be patient. Let's help that knee non-surgically so we don't reawaken a sleeping cancer. Now, had she had the surgery, and by the way, cancer patients are also prone to blood clots. So you have a knee surgery, 3 months later you die of a blood clot, nobody raises an eyebrow. It's just a inevitable consequence. So this is one of the ways that inadvertently medicine can hurt. And I think part of that, Dan, is because they've eliminated your family doctor from the conversation. Look, when I was in my residency, and even today, family doctors were almost looked down upon. Like, hey, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you a specialist? You make more money. It's more prestige. Primary care is not present at the bedside in hospitals. They're not there when these decisions are being sometimes suggested. And there's a loss of autonomy. Sometimes they're presented to patients as if there's no alternative. You have bone-on-bone arthritis. Unspoken is, this is hopeless nonsense. The body's constantly trying to heal itself. I'll be 62 in a couple of months, and I was told 20 years ago I needed a knee replacement. I still have my biological tissue. So this is one of the ways that modern medicine can inadvertently hurt people. Your listeners, they're an intelligent breed. That's why they're listening, right? Get out your pen. Here are some questions, right? ask questions. Are there alternatives? Do I have another path forward? They should seek out a well-educated healthcare advisor. Now, note my terminology. I love that I'm a doctor and I'm board certified, and that's very cool. But Dan, we were speaking earlier, the fund of knowledge that's been accumulated by many intelligent lay people has enormous merit, in part because there is no predetermined agenda, right? If I'm Freddie, the knee replacement surgery, I might tend to look at things with a different perspective than otherwise. So that's just one example of the ways in which medicine can sort of harm people.
Yeah.
I think another piece of this is the rush, right? You can't go to your doctor nowadays. I like to ask my patients, what's the first thing your doctor's thinking about when you enter the office? And the answer to the question is, how do I get them out of my office? Because I have another patient waiting. And medicine has been ground down to a computer templated rat race.
Yeah.
And there are now third parties looking over the shoulder of your doctor. Every week, I get email messages, text messages, not text, but messages from the pharmacy, faxes,
Wow.
prompting me to prescribe statin drugs. Now,
Wow.
why are they doing that? I didn't ask it. The patients did not. Patients are unaware that this is happening. Well, if you're a conventional doc and you're getting these messages, it gets you uncomfortable. Am I standing out from the crowd? Am I not practicing in a manner that would be endorsed by my supervisors? You know, Dan, when I started practice, I hung a shingle and I was an independent entity. Nowadays, most primary care doctors are employed. They have to be mindful of the person signing their check.
Yep.
And the person signing their check is directing and observing many of their behaviors. There's a third person in that room, and it's not always in the patient's best interest. So the number one thing is ask questions. Don't be in a hurry. Most of the time, you have an opportunity to take a step back and give reflection before anybody does something to you, any invasive procedure. Quick stat. This is a study done actually on non-cardiovascular surgery. So these are people past 60 who had knee surgery, arthroscopy, etc. 1 out of 14 of them, Dan, had silent strokes, undocumented symptomatically. They did an MRI before and after. A year later, many of them had cognitive decline. Think about that. Is that a risk factor that you're willing to entertain for the face of a semi-elective surgical procedure? So
Wow.
Modern medicine is a little bit, I call it, sort of an arrogance of their capabilities.
Yeah.
So we need to be aware of that, be your own advocate.
It's unbelievable how conventional medicine has really turned into a business, and a lot of that's driven by big pharma and the dollars that are behind it. But going back to that stat of someone that underwent a knee surgery, and they often see some cognitive decline a year later. What is it? What's the correlation there between the surgery and possible cognitive decline?
It's still being elucidated, but there's a consequence to this general anesthesia. We've seen it, or we saw it initially in people who had cardiac bypass surgery, that a year later there was cognitive decline. So the vascular supply to the brain may well be at risk. And whenever you have surgery, folks, your body goes into a hypercoagulable state, meaning the blood clots more easily. And as a consequence, you can get microemboli. This is a theoretical construct that can choke off blood flow. I'm an osteopathic physician. Andrew Taylor Still, the founder of osteopathic medicine, is fond of saying the rule of the artery is supreme. Simply put, no blood supply, no life. Now we're talking cellular medicine, one of my favorite topics. We're talking microscopic blood flow.
Yeah.
How many times do I hear patients say, oh, I went to the doc, they said my heart's great, my blood pressure's great. Folks, those are 1970s statistics, right? We need to go past all of that. The aspiration that I have for your listeners is to be thinking about and aspiring toward a 120-year lifespan. I believe that is a legitimate goal worthy of pursuit. The common denominator to illness the most prevalent risk factor is aging itself. Conventionally, we don't ask another question. What is it about aging that supports that risk profile? Why does it happen? Not just that it occurs. So you can sort of see a self-fulfilling prophecy, correct?
Yeah.
This is an expectation. I go to see my doctor, Dr. Petteruti, you are 62. This is to be expected, according perhaps to historical patterns, but we don't have to stay there anymore. The reason why I dove into the field that I'm in is because of the disconnect between the rapid advance of anti-aging science and the choke point of delivering it to patients. You made the great point about the profit-driven dynamic. Medicine is now vertically integrated. I told you a moment ago, your doctor is employed by a chain, a hospital, a network, and that network is mindful of their bottom line. And that bottom line is driven by procedures. Chronically sick patients are very profitable. You could do stuff to them and they'll kind of follow you along the way. Where's the space for dynamic health preservation? We maintain that it is grassroots driven by people like you, educating the public, who will then go and seek their own path. And we hope that over time we'll develop outlets for that form of proactive health pursuit.
Hey guys, I want to take a quick second to tell you about Kion, which provides natural supplements and clean coffee for vibrant health. Kion coffee is in the top 3% of all coffee grown worldwide that can claim to be specialty grade, which means it's free from yeast, pesticides, mold, and mycotoxins. It's also one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had. Kion also has a really great aminos product that aids in better sleep, post-exercise recovery, provides fast, clean energy, supports fasting, and improves cognitive performance. Experience the energy and performance benefits of Kion Aminos today. To get 15% off your order of Kion coffee or any of their products and supplements, visit getkion.com/danvoss and enter code DANVOSS, that's DANVOSS, at checkout for 15% off your order.
I could draw an analogy here between technological advance in electronics and in health. So I'm old enough to remember when a television set cost like nothing, right? My monthly budget to watch television in the 1970s was $0. I'd turn the thing on. Now I've got about a $300-400 line item in my household budget for stuff like TVs that I can hardly even turn on. Right? But everybody's got that. The point is, it's a new thing that we have incorporated into our lives.
Yes.
I maintain that your listeners need to be thinking about the line item in their budget for anti-aging support, for advanced cellular health support, because it is a new thing. It's real, and it's coming to your neighborhood. And it's, in a weird kind of way, Dan, it's almost too bad, because it has put people in a position of having to make decisions they never had to contemplate.
Right.
Now, the patients who I see, the ones who come for infusions, get hormonal therapy, they're all in, and they've made the choice to try to age differently. Now, to the average person sitting on the sidelines, there's certain comfort in fatalism. The idea that genetic predetermination will declare their outcome. That's false thinking. Your genes represent a fraction of your health and longevity. The bulk of it is environmental, from the internal environment that you deliver to your body to the external environment where you live. That makes it harder, because you can't just say, well, que sera, when it comes to longevity. I mean, you can do that if you want, right? Because we're all about free will, individuals determining their path. So it is totally cool if somebody decides, you know what, Dr. Petteruti and Dan, it's very fascinating, but mark me absent. I have no interest in any of this newfangled stuff. That's okay. But you're going to watch a point of separation occur. Someday you'll be sitting around the golf course, the restaurant, and you're going to see people that are 70 that are looking and behaving like they're 50 and 45. Mm-hmm. And they're the active anti-agers.
Yeah.
There's a real difference here, and it's a very value-driven decision.
Yeah.
Where you're going to spend your time and money and energy. You're going to do cold plunges, or you're going to hang out at a hookah bar.
Right.
I suppose you could do both.
You mentioned the age 120, and I find that fascinating because that's the number I'd probably give if somebody asked me, how old do you want to live to? I think as a 29-year-old male who's relatively healthy, I think I should be able to get to 120. Hopefully, maybe longer. But what makes you believe that 120 should be the expected lifespan for somebody living today?
Well, Dan, first let me tell you, you got to be aiming for 150. Otherwise, you're guilty of lacking ambition. Mm-hmm. But here's why: it's not just a pie in the sky. There is something known as the Hayflick Equation. And Dr. Hayflick, it was 1950s or 60s, analyzed how long a human cell could live. Mm-hmm. And not coincidentally, he found it's about 120 years. Then we have our experience in real life. People have lived to be 120, albeit they're rare, but Homo sapiens have done that. Then there's a biblical precedence for those so inclined. Genesis, man shall live to be 120. So we have some interestingly aligned paradigms here. Mm-hmm. We also have a progressive expansion of life expectancy. Now comes the anti-aging science. I love the work done by Dr. David Sinclair out of Harvard, looking at mitochondria and nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide and the link toward aging. So we're starting to unlock some of the dynamics that cause aging. One of the things that we advocate at DRIPBaR, and that I'm a big proponent of, is identifying accumulated heavy metals like lead that can corrode brain health. You mentioned that you're hoping to get to be 120. I'll say I want to live one more year at whatever age I'm at.
Yeah.
As long as I'm feeling vital, right?
Great answer.
You're only here once, you're a long time dead. So there's the basis of the 120-year lifespan. Now, the other point of that is what I call preparation for escalators. So if you're in great health, you've got a good vascular system, your brain is intact, your muscles and your skeletal system is strong, your immune system is sufficient, now you're on a platform to take advantage of the next escalator. It's going to come. There's going to be things that can help with telomere degradation. There are going to be pharmacologic and infusion-based interventions that you and I can't even contemplate that are going to become available in 10, 20, in your case, in 40 years. And you think about that and say, wow, how cool is that? I don't want to be the guy that gets left at the bus stop when that bus arrives and says, hey, gang, hop aboard. We got 20 more years of youthful living. Oh, but I'm sorry, Dr. Petteruti, you can't get on the bus because you're too broken down. So it's in preparation, for what comes next as much as enjoying the moment. Yeah.
You mentioned Dr. David Sinclair. I was listening to the podcast that he was on with Dave Asprey on Bulletproof Radio. And they got into the conversation around, living as long as possible. And if you're physically and mentally healthy and intact, and this is what Dr. Sinclair was saying, there's really no reason for you ever to want to die, right? Like if you are really truly healthy, you'll want to live forever. And not everybody wants to live forever, but you should at least aim to live to at least 120 or if not 150. That was very interesting.
Very, very true statement. In my experience with my patients, you ask the younger people, do you want to live to be 100? And some of them will say no. They have a perception of it being disabled, dependent. I had a gentleman in my practice, he's 95, asked the question, hey, you want to live to next year? He goes, hell yes. So
Love that.
Point's well taken.
So how do we get past that narrative that aging has to be a burden? It has to be something that's troublesome and painful, and you're sitting on your, in a chair all day, having people take care of you. How can we get past that mindset and get into more of a thriving mindset as we get into our hundreds?
Yeah. So part of the big step now is a philosophical one based upon our experiential evidence. A man or a woman at age 100 cuts themselves. The cut heals. The body is perpetually attempting to regenerate itself. The question to ask is, what's missing? Mm-hmm. We believe that when you put back into the body the parts that are missing, the substances that are inadequate, and you remove from it that which doesn't belong there, the barriers to remaining vital can be eliminated. Think about Homo sapiens. We are born, we grow to maturity, sexual reproduction, we have children, and then, we fade and die. This is a biological imperative. There is no Darwinian pressure, selective pressure, to keep us alive past reproductive age. So our genetic machinery has not really evolved for longevity. That's where the science comes in, right? Our gonads are engineered to fail. Testicles and ovaries, engineered to fail. Well, we can accept that as normal, or we can say, well, why should I? At age 48, I began testosterone therapy as part of my own anti-aging pursuit. I did so because I know the biology of gonads were that they were going to fail. I believe that women should be on hormone therapy, and that the paranoia, I'll call it, regarding hormones and cancer is grotesquely overplayed to the detriment of female health and vitality. Shrinking, withering, fading is no way to totter through old life, advanced ages. Yeah. The future of a 80, 90, 100-year-old person is not going to be walkers and canes. It galls me when I hear people talking about, we need to prepare for the future by building more nursing homes. No, we need to prepare for the future by empowering anti-aging therapies so that people don't suffer the consequence. There's nothing inevitable about osteoporosis, about sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass, nothing inevitable about cognitive decline. Your brain should stay crisp unto your death. There's nothing inevitable about loss of sexual vitality. You should remain active if you choose unto your death. That is starting out with an expectation, Dan.
Yeah.
The idea that, I'm not going to accept the limits that are imposed on me as being historically unalterable, because there's evidence in front of me of it happening.
Yeah.
So you look to your left and your right, there are going to be people that are doing this already. Very much a grassroots movement. It's fascinating to me that you and I are having this conversation. You're a well-educated layperson. I'm a humble family doc. I don't emanate from an ivory tower. This is not, folks, a top-down revolution. It's a bottom-up. So we're driving the train now regarding our health, and the resources are out there. We've got to then separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
So when I started pursuing anti-aging, as you know, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, but it doesn't mean that the information accessible to you is not credible. It means that you have to be an intelligent reader.
Yep. Yeah, it's a big part of what and why I do what I do, and I'm pretty sure for you as well, is to redefine that narrative that we've held on to for far too long, that aging has to be this difficult thing and a burden to our families, and we can't age gracefully into our later years of life. It's a really good point too around the nursing home example that you gave. People saying that with growing population we have to get ready to build more nursing homes, and that's just not the case. It should be more around implementing healthy lifestyle practices now, so that we don't have to get to that point and be in a nursing home in our later years. You talked about hormones. I wanted to touch on that a little bit. So why do you believe that all people need hormone replacement at some point in their lives?
Yeah, absolutely. You think about people, when you're in your physical prime, you're hormonally enriched. Hormones are critical for muscle mass, for bone density. One of the scourges of the elderly, a broken hip. You don't see 30-year-olds breaking their hip. That is a devastating outcome that leads to death and disability. And it directly ties to hormonal depletion. You can take all the vitamin D and calcium you want, but without hormones, that bone will decay inevitably. You look at loss of sexual vitality. It really robs many people of some of the joy of life. There's a reason why Women lose their sex drive, men lose their ability, and both often have a decline in sexual activity. It's because the hormones are leaving the building. Just as when you were a child, the lack of hormones correlated with a lack of sexual interest, the converse is true at the other end of life. How about brain function? There are studies correlating hormonal deprivation with increasing dementia risk. In studies of women who've had hysterectomies, there's an increased rate of dementia. There's a study correlating lifetime exposure to hormone, even birth control pills, with a decline in the rate of dementia in women. In men, we now have studies looking at men who have been deprived of testosterone, in some cases in a vain attempt to help prostate cancer, and they have increasing dementia rates. So these sex hormones are not simply gratuitous sex-enhancing hormones. They're critical. They're neurotransmitters. Testosterone makes the brain work better. I can't tell you how many patients come to me, middle-aged, let's call them 40s to 50s, women more than men, who complain of feeling tired. They're not sleeping well. They're irritable. They've lost interest in sexual activity, and their doctor will label them as being depressed. Put them on an antidepressant. I maintain that many of these people are starting to feel the effect of hormonal decline. And when we replete them with their hormones, the brain snaps too. The brain works better. Mood gets better. There's a correlation between testosterone and speed of neurotransmission. The speed of those electrical impulses corresponds to the formation of new memory. So you've heard people use that phrase, I had a senior moment. What is that? That's horrifying.
Yeah.
Your brain's not working right.
Right.
So the hormonal piece, I feel, is part of anti-aging, and not only I, but those that are practicing anti-aging therapy. You have to give credit to the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine for pioneering much of the teaching around this. Much of it is against mainstream dogma that hormones equal cancer. There's Dr. Abraham Morgentaler from Harvard, urologist, who wrote the book Testosterone for Life, that explored many of the pre-existing biases about testosterone. The correlation between testosterone will give you prostate cancer. It's going to give you hardening of the arteries. We have a study here at Intellectual Medicine based on observation of our patients. It's in pre-publication draft form. We had 16 patients with hardening of the arteries documented by calcium scores. It's a CAT scan of the heart where you can see calcium build up on the arteries. All 16 of them are on testosterone therapy, both men and women. 15 out of 16 of them had a reversal, a reduction in the hardening of the artery when given intravenous therapy called chelation therapy. It's evidence supporting this idea that other studies have supported, that testosterone does not accelerate or contribute to coronary artery disease. So there are alternative, conflicting research out there in the literature, and you can certainly come upon research that would contradict what I just said.
Sure.
This is the space where the reader has to reflect, kind of make their own decisions.
Yeah.
Same holds true for the women. So it comes down to what I call the philosophy of regret. If I go on testosterone, as I have, and someday I develop prostate cancer, I must be philosophically comfortable with my decision, knowing that I didn't bring it upon myself. And I am. And if that happens, I know that it was through some other means. On the other hand, suppose I avoid testosterone for fear of cancer, or if you're a woman, you avoid hormone therapy, including testosterone for women, for fear of breast cancer. And you shrink, you lose 2 inches of your height, and your skin gets lax, and you get vaginal atrophy, and you get somewhat depressed, and oh, by the way, now you get breast cancer. There is no clear path without potential outcome. Therefore, you have to start with your own philosophy, reinforced by the information and literature that you've got. So I vote for hormones. I like the notion of vitality over withering. One of the things that makes people fearful of getting older is dependence. I can't get up out of the chair. I can't walk. I can't drive my car. It's physical loss of vitality.
Yeah.
So for those reasons that I advocate, and many others, strong consideration of hormone therapy for the majority of people. For women, I like to see them consider it by age 40, no later than 50. And for men, a little bit later, but whenever symptoms manifest.
Okay.
So for men, by age 60, even if you feel great, I encourage them to consider introducing it for part of their health anti-aging platform.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody decides that they are interested in hormone therapy, what are some steps they can take and maybe some resources that are out there for them to learn more and maybe implement that into their life?
Great. There's great information available at your podcast now that we're talking about it. I do a podcast called Intellectual Medicine with Dr. Petteruti, and this topic comes up periodically.
Mm-hmm.
Those are sources of information. The American Academy of Anti-Aging Therapy and the American College for the Advancement of Medicine are two organizations that advocate for anti-aging modalities. You want to find a provider, a nurse practitioner or a physician in your community that is knowledgeable and skilled in this field. I advocate for somebody who can prescribe hormone therapy, and that's because if they can't, they'll be intrinsically limited. So pharmacists can give good counsel. Sometimes naturopaths can give great counsel, but their limitation often is they can't actually prescribe the hormones. So I advocate for somebody who has that capability. And then if you really want to look at it from both sides of that equation, I think it's the American Menopause Society is a conventional medical organization that will give your listeners the alternative view that I'm espousing, right? And in fairness to the debate, there's a conventional view and they tend to embrace it.
Yeah.
Going to your family doctor, or unless your OBGYN doctor is well read in anti-aging use of hormones, they will tend to reflexively reject it as being dangerous. So I think that it's reasonable to broach the topic and explore their willingness to discuss it with you, but I would not let their potentially negative impression be the end of the conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. A lot of people have their opinion and they share that opinion and without giving any other context to the other side. So I appreciate you saying, this is what I do believe in and I'm going to take this approach, but there's also an argument for the other side. So I appreciate your approach and your openness there.
Yeah, well, thanks for mentioning that, Dan, because I do believe that there is a bridge here, right? It's not us versus them.
Right.
It's not Dan and Dr. Petteruti and railing against, all that is conventional medicine.
Right.
However, there is a call for balance. There's a call for autonomy. There's a call for patient-driven conversations and not a force-fed paradigm of health being dictated to us from experts.
Yeah.
Because nobody's an expert about Dan except for Dan.
True.
So we got to respect that.
Yeah, very true. You mentioned supplements at some point in our conversation here. So I'd love to chat about vitamins and supplements. Why do you think that most people should be receiving intravenous vitamins or supplements?
Yeah. So there are a couple of reasons. One is that we don't know what the maximum beneficial amount is for any of these supplements. We're familiar with the RDA, recommended daily allowance. All right. If you don't want to get scurvy, that'll get you by. But what is the top of the mark? Now, conventional docs will often say, well, it's just expensive urine. They're manifesting ignorance regarding how these essential vitamins and minerals work in the body. Now we don't have irrefutable evidence, but we do have building clinical support that infusing the body with high-dose vitamins can be restorative to many of the conditions afflicting people nowadays, right? Anxiety and fatigue, we see that all the time. We know that the brain is an organic substance and it runs on micronutrients. It is one of the most metabolically active parts of the body. And getting those micronutrients in abundant levels to the brain can be challenging. Bypassing the gut is often essential to do that. Many people suffer with gastrointestinal issues. How many people nowadays are on Prilosec or some equivalent drug that interferes with the environment of the gut, making it hard to absorb? How many people have been on antibiotics in the past year that disrupt the microbiota? So you can be dealing with a barrier to absorption and not really know it. So that's one approach, especially when there are these chronic symptomatic conditions that conventional medicine doesn't have a great remedy for. Chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, post-Lyme syndrome. Now we're seeing COVID long haulers. There's a common denominator that is felt to be at play with many of them.
Yeah.
Turning it to another real cornerstone of longevity, cardiac and brain health, I believe, is identifying and reducing these toxic heavy metals. Lead is chief among them. I recently published a paper in a peer-reviewed medical journal validating the outcomes that we have at Intellectual Medicine doing infusion-based chelation therapy to reduce lead from the body. Now, lead is hard to measure. It doesn't stay in the bloodstream, so a blood test has limited value. It goes into the blood and then it absorbs in bone and tissue, and it accumulates like a bank account year after year after year. It's been estimated that humans nowadays have a level of lead that is 5,000 times the normal baseline in a clean environment. You can't avoid it, right? We've been smelting lead for 5,000 years. It covers the planet. And so folks will say to me, well, how did that lead get there? It's in your water, it's in your food, it's in the air. So the goal here is not to make people paranoid about where the lead's coming from. You want to take reasonable precaution, but rather to educate them about the potential merit of making regular intermittent infusion-based chelation therapy part of their healthy lifestyle. You start when you're young, and you don't have to do it as often because the lead is not accumulated quite so aggressively. But it's there at birth. It comes from the umbilical cord. It gets deposited in our body. There are studies corresponding total body lead level to accelerated decline of cognition. And there are studies showing intravenous chelation can reverse and diminish some of the risks of heart disease, heart attacks, strokes. So lead is a neurotoxin. Pure toxin, it damages the brain. It also is a cardiotoxin, and it is an amplifier, it's felt to be, increasing of blood pressure and damaging to the endothelium, the lining of the arteries. So that's one of the most ubiquitous heavy metals. Another that we see a lot of is cadmium. So you take these two together and ask another question. Like we started out saying, what about 120-year lifespan? Imagine a toxin that is uniformly distributed throughout the entire country, and we're all being poisoned at the same level with the similar consequences. We would never know we're being poisoned. We would accept that as the norm. This is the rate of heart disease. This is the rate of dementia. Really, it's not uniform across the world. It's not because of our genetics. There's something happening here that we can modify. And what we can do, and this is where the driving force behind CellV and the DRIPBaRs that we are now opening throughout the country is to make this available, safe, and affordable. Because we want to have, whenever you do something that is preventative, right? The first criteria, it's got to be safe because you're taking healthy people and you're now introducing something to them. The second, it's got to be reasonably affordable. I don't want to create a pathway of health that only the rich and famous can afford. I have no interest in that. Right? The rich and famous have had enough fun. What about the rest of us schmucks? And that's why when we do these studies, whether it's a calcium score or the lead reduction, we modify the treatments to fit common budgets. And I think that's really critical because insurance will never cover this. And quite frankly, I don't think it should. We're talking about volitional choice, how to spend your money and where you're going to invest it. So I invest mine. I do 2 infusions every month. Someday, when I'm 110 and still vital, I will look back and say either, thank God I did that, or, you know what, this was just fortunate. I had good genes. I would have made it here anyhow. Maybe I wasted my money. So this is the philosophy that we were reflecting upon earlier. You got to be comfortable with the path.
So true. A big piece, I think, with supplements too is the concept of our food supply and how much nutrients are depleted in our soil and our food supply. So to your point you said earlier about, a lot of people might say that supplements are just expensive urine. But what we're not realizing is that we're not getting that same nutritional value in our food today than we did 50 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just
very true.
Something that we
very true. And the dismissal of supplements as being inconsequential is not worthy of being considered unless it comes from a highly educated source. And look, I went to medical school. I did my residency. I can tell you that the amount of education I had regarding supplements was nothing. It was none. It was reflexive dismissal. I studied pharmacology. I studied antibiotics. I figured out which drug to use for what symptom. That's it.
Yep.
So your doctor is a critical piece of your healthcare continuum. Let me never disparage my colleagues in conventional medicine. They are good people, well-intentioned and well-educated. But I would not go to a conventionally trained doctor for advice on supplements. It's not what they do.
Right.
You need to find an educated source. And now some doctors have taken the time to educate themselves in that field. Chiropractors have done that. Naturopaths have done it. Dan, there are health coaches that have done it. And bear in mind that we all have what I call a swallow capacity and a budget. And bear in mind the dynamic of self-interest is at play even in health support non-conventional medicine. For instance, I had a patient of mine who called up a pharmaceutical, not a supplement supplier. It was an online supplement supplier. And he said, I was taking so many supplements, I called them up to see which ones I could stop. He said, by the time I hung up the phone, I bought 3 more. It's like some of the supplements sound so magnificent that you think, I don't want that. Let me have that. So I like to really be demanding of the supplements. I like to have them edited based upon the person, their age, and their need. My personal threshold is no more than 10 in a day. That's kind of where I live. And if I add number 11, I decide which of the 10 I'm going to eliminate to make room for it. I know some people whose swallow capacity is 2 pills a day. They just don't go down so well. And then you have to decide, top to bottom. And so some of my tops, right, vitamin D. We now know through COVID, and you told me how you were drawn into COVID. The benefit of supplements will be variable depending upon your risk profile. I like vitamin D for most people. It's hard to get levels to the point where they seem most healthy. That can be measured in the blood. It's a 25 hydroxy D is the blood test I recommend. And the range that I aspire towards for my patients is between 50 and roughly 80 or 90. It's usually in a nanogram per liter. There are some that advocate higher levels, but I think that that's not validated based on research. Then there are some supplements that have an appeal, but may not be necessary for everybody. For instance, fish oils. A fish oil supplement, if you're a vegetarian who eats salmon, is probably superfluous. A fish oil supplement, if your cardio-neuro risk profile is really low, may not be your best use of a supplement. Coenzyme Q10 is another wonderful supplement. However, if you're young and vital, you probably make plenty of it. Your body makes CoQ10. You may not need it. We were talking a moment ago about David Sinclair and about NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
Yep.
If you're below the age of 40, you probably make plenty of it, and you don't need to add any more. So there are some things that have cellular attributes that are just not needed based upon your age and your circumstance.
Yeah.
So they're worthy of being profiled. Most multivitamins that you get over the counter are a smattering of tiny doses with little clinical impact, and typically are not the type of supplement that I advocate. So I like vitamin D. I like magnesium. It's a ubiquitous essential mineral that tends to be low in levels for most people. So a few things that I like, but the take-home message is try not to fly blind and try not to be your own clinician with supplements, and be mindful of where the supplements are emanating from. Ideally, you want a counselor whose source of revenue is independent of the supplements themselves. That is, they're not making money based on the amount of supplements they sell. It's not illegitimate for a clinician or a practitioner to have a profit margin if they are promoting certain supplements, but you just don't want it to be the sole source of revenue for them because it skews the conversation.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, I get asked all the time, like, how can I determine which supplements to take and how much to take? And do I need to take it every single day? And when, can I take a break for a few days? And I think the big piece there is to do that testing. And, there's a common phrase, test, don't guess. And a lot of people do that. They guess and they take certain supplements based on what people are recommending, and they have no real idea of whether they need that or not. And also whether they're getting that in some of their diet. They might already be getting some of this nutritional value through their diet. So it's important to get that
always
testing.
The best way.
Yeah, definitely.
Always the best way through the diet. And I would put a specific caution against multi-level marketing. Look, if your next door neighbor suddenly starts to tell you they have the elixir of life, that this supplement will it's like cure everything, run.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
Yeah, so true. Very true. Yeah. I know a lot of your work is around facial anti-aging. So what are your top treatments for facial anti-aging?
Right. So as you can bear witness, my face is a little bit ruddy today. Yesterday, I did a plasma microneedling, which is one of the things that I absolutely love for the face. Let me start out by saying I most love the things that take advantage of your body's own healing dynamic. So before we get to fill injections or surgical enhancements, there's a need to take care of cellular health within the dermis and the epidermis. So years ago, a person would get a facelift and eventually they just look taut. And that's because you could change the positioning of that skin, but nothing was being done about texture. So for skin, it starts internally. We're just talking about micronutrient support, right? If you don't have enough vitamin C, it's going to be hard to make the collagen you need. And vitamin C is really variable in the amount you need. Human beings are one of the few mammals that don't make their own C. Other animals under duress make huge amounts of it. So in regard to vitamin C, we talked about surgery earlier, huge demand for surges of vitamin C. So that's a component internally. We talked about hormones. Hormones help skin quality, elasticity, and texture. So they're a component of it as well. Proper facial care, like protecting your face from ultraviolet damage. I don't advocate slathering on sunblock from head to toe. Really, your lower body, if you're in Chicago, God bless you, when the sun comes out, get out there and enjoy it. Don't be paranoid. Just use a little on your face. Yeah. That's all. Yeah. That's the part that ages. Yeah. And then the intense pulse light therapy is really, I think, transformational technology. This is using light-based energy to impose a controlled trauma to the skin that instigates its own healing mechanism to create new skin cells and to reverse some of the age spots we see. These therapies are widely available. IPL is the acronym. They come in a variety of different types of equipment. It's a little different from a laser. A laser is one wavelength. Intense light is multi-wavelength, which I like better because it hits different colors. I advocate starting this actually as young as your 20s to 30s because you want to get in front of the wave. You know what's coming next. Yeah. I like the microneedling treatments. It's a little more aggressive, but when we use plasma, we take, my own blood in this case was drawn. It was spun out, separating platelets from the red and white cells. Platelets have growth factors in them, and they're re-injected into the face and skin. They help the face to regenerate tissue so that as I age, I can do this periodically to maintain skin elasticity and integrity, diminish wrinkles and fine lines. So those are some of the things I like best.
Wow. Super interesting. Before I get to my last question, where can people find you online that are listening to this and they're like, I want to know more. I want to maybe implement some of these practices into my lifestyle. Where can people find you online?
Two vehicles. One of them, if you go to Intellectual Medicine, Dr. Petteruti, you'll find our website and our podcast, and that's available. The other is DRIPBaR, which is the infusion centers that we have launched that are opening up across the country. As I mentioned, part of our mission is to make infusion-based health support universally available. And we feel like this piece is really critical for cell health and anti-aging. So those are two pathways forward that they can utilize to get more information. And you can also look for local physicians in your community by Googling anti-aging doctors and seeing who comes up and what kind of credentials they carry.
Great. And I'll have your links all linked up in the description and show notes for people to access.
Thank you.
We have talked a lot about, obviously, anti-aging and longevity, living longer. I'd like to talk and wrap things up around your why. Why is it important that you live to, let's say, 120 or 150 or beyond? What is it that's there for you that's so important?
It's a great point. Before we ask a question, should you live to be 120, say, why would you want to do that? What's the point of it? Well, I've heard people say to me, I'm doing this, I'm doing something for myself. I do a lot of medical weight loss treatment, a whole nother topic we can get into, but it's a foundational piece of anti-aging. To summarize it, one of the researchers once told me, the skinny rats bury the fat rats. That's what he was saying in summation. But the why of it is so that we can love better, longer, more robustly. In life, there are two types of states of being. There are people that need help and people that give help. And we can be both, right? But the longer we're healthy, the longer we're independent, the longer we're vital, we can give a gift to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. We can acquire wisdom and experience that we can carry forward and not become, what do we do with Uncle Steve? Look at him, the poor thing. But rather, let's ask Uncle Steve. He's been around 110 years. He's seen a couple of things. That type of generativity and ability to give is part of what I believe we should be thinking about driving us forward. And as we live longer, we're going to make more money. It's a weird psychosocial economic dynamic. Warren Buffett made the majority of his money after age 70. This notion of exponential return. Those who embrace anti-aging and combine it with healthy financial lifestyles are going to have sick amounts of money when they're 100 years old, and an ability with that to affect other outcomes by directing it towards good causes.
Yes.
So it's really a great question you ask, like, why live longer? And it's so that we can do more, we can extend ourselves more, we can be more present. And eventually when we leave the stage, we leave the planet in a better space. I like to believe that if you knew you're going to live to be 200, you'd care a little bit more about pollution and litter and the state of the environment. It's no longer, well, I'll be gone in 10 years. No, you're going to be stuck here.
Yeah.
So let's all chip in.
It's so true. You brought up so many good points there. For me, I'm with you. I want to be around to make an impact and to live vitally. I want to be around for my kids and my grandkids, but heck, I want to be around to see my great grandkids, right? And see them grow up and live a healthy life. And you made a really good point there around the environment and the sustainability factor. I guess that's another question maybe we can chat about briefly here is, what can we be doing to make sure, yes, we want to live longer, but, how can we live on a planet with an increase in population, right? We have close to 8 billion people on this planet, and that's going to grow. I think the projection there is like at least 10 or 11 or maybe even 12 billion in our lifetime. How can we do that where we have this growing population, but then also make sure we're doing it in a sustainable way?
Right. So a little bit philosophical, but I advocate for more dense population, like living closer together. Look, I grew up in a suburban neighborhood. I think suburban neighborhoods had their time. Levittown was cool when it was conceived. You don't fit 1 billion people into 1 acre lots with 4-bedroom colonial houses. There's a reason there's a housing crisis, and it's because of that paradigm of construction. I've talked to my builder friends, and they'll say, look, I have zoning requirements that force me to purchase an acre of land. I have to build a $500,000 home. Well, I aspire to live in a high rise, in a nice condo apartment with a smaller sort of footprint per head. As we grow in population, I believe that more of us can adopt to an urban lifestyle with vertical living.
Yeah.
Country living will always be out there, and it's very cool.
Sure.
And ironically, by really building up city centers more vertically, more densely, we can preserve surrounding land.
Yeah.
It's this kind of population packing, if you will, and it doesn't have to be inhumane. It can be comfortable. It can even be luxuriant, because now you're devoting resources that are common to everybody. Instead of having 20 backyards, you've got one park.
Yep.
And people can enjoy that. And it means getting along with each other. It means seeing your neighbor instead of glaring at him from across the fence.
Yes.
So I don't know completely what the future holds, but I'm optimistic for mankind. I see a future where we are growing many of our proteins in vertical buildings, where we are no longer fishing the seas, but we are biologically engineering the meats that we would then eat.
Yeah.
Some people, that kind of grosses them out. I think it's awesome. You give me like salmon that you grew inside of a building with no pollutants, with no killing dolphins through fishing, with no fish farms. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You can start to grow like steak and meat in a building. So we will adopt, I believe, our nutritional expectations and standards. It won't come easy. For every entrenched interest, there's a lobby to try to preserve it and keep it the way it is, because there's a self-interest there. We talked earlier about the healthcare system. So we'll need grassroots to help push that agenda, and we'll need to sort of change our expectations. If we're going to fit all these people on the planet, you want to be around to be 120. Well, it means making more room. So until Elon Musk colonizes Mars, this is what we're going to have to do.
Yeah. So many great points. It's true. I mean, if we're going to be around to those numbers that we've thrown out, 120, 150, whatever it is, we have to find a way to do it together and to do it ethically, to do it sustainably. And we all have to play our role to take care of this planet if we're gonna be around. So a lot of great points there.
Yeah. Open to change, right? That's
right.
what your show's promoting.
Yeah.
Being open to change.
So true. So true. Well, Dr. Petteruti, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your expertise and your time and coming on the show.
I like you. Likewise, I appreciate your effort you're putting forth. You're part of the grassroots movement. Wonderful to see it. Keep it up.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.